entire narrative about the trajectory, the direction of this war, and of the mental stability of President Putin is just wrong. Bill Roggio, senior fellow at the Foundation for the Center of Defense of Democracies, thinks so, and he writes, Putin is not crazy, and the Russian invasion is not failing. The West's delusions about this war and its failure to understand the enemy, he writes, will prevent it from saving Ukraine. Joining me now is Lee Smith, columnist for Tablet and host of the Daily Wire series, China, the Enemy Within. Lee, that's the question I was trying to get at with Brian. Everyone's hearts break to see this suffering, at the level of human suffering that we're seeing it. We saw suffering in Hong Kong when freedom was crushed across the globe with all of these needless attacks on independence and freedom. But this is horrific. But
it's heartbreaking.
But are we getting the full picture here?
Well, I mean, I think it's very important to remember that many of the same officials who are speaking about Putin's intentions, Putin's competence, Putin's armed forces, unfortunately, this goes back to many of the same people who were telling us for 5-6 years about the intentions of Vladimir Putin to interfere in the 2016 U.S. presidential election on behalf of Donald Trump. At that point, the intelligence community got itself in a lot of trouble. And this is one of the reasons, or the key reason I've been saying for several years, what we saw was not just a Beltway political scandal. It was a national security disaster waiting to happen. Now, whether it's the press, whether it's coming out of the Pentagon, whether it's coming out of intelligence community assessments at this point, I believe that the American public has no very good idea what's going on, because these same people have now established a reputation for lying, in particular about Russia, and for using Ukraine as an instrument against their adversaries, both foreign and domestic.
In other words, if you don't repeat lockstep what the Pentagon or various lobbyists for defense contractors would prefer the narrative to be, then you're a traitor, then you are pro-Putin, that you like the suffering. I mean, is that what they're trying to do?
Well, look, Laura, as you said before, and as you've shown over the last week, I mean, the different clips that you've shown, you've really shown the American public the violence, the chaos, what's happening, what Vladimir Putin is doing. The larger problem here is that to explain how we got to this point, it's not about being pro-Putin. It's not about being pro-Russian. It's not about feeling heartbroken for the Ukrainian public. What it is, we need to understand what role the U.S. national security establishment has played getting us here, what role even Joe Biden as vice president under Barack Obama has played getting us here. These are very important details. So as that article you're talking about, we need to understand actually what Putin is doing. We need to understand who Vladimir Putin is without the lies of the national security establishment and the prestige press. We need to understand those things in order to understand how America comes out of this okay, and how the Ukrainians come out of this okay.
Well, they're certainly willing, Lee, and then we got to get to something that Harris said today, but they're certainly willing to do a deep dive and a broad look at President Xi of China, right? He's a brilliant strategist. He understands business. You know, he has a dynamic view of the energy sector. I mean, this guy is a cold stone killer. And yeah, he is probably really, obviously, he's not a dumb person. He's obviously a smart, but he's also a dictator. So, but they're willing to kind of do that with China and have this expansive view of our relationship with China. But they never were willing to do that with Russia, getting to your point. I have to play this Kamala Harris basically touting the administration's line here. Watch.
What we want is that the Ukrainian people will be free and that they will be safe. But we are now at a place where obviously Russia has yet again invaded Ukraine, and we must stand in solidarity with our allies and make sure there are severe and swift consequences, which is what we have been doing.
Lee, I mean, the woman is just a menace. She has no idea what she's saying. She just says things like swift consequences, apparently not understanding those actually are words that could get America into a big, dangerous mess with Russia right now, correct?
Right. You were discussing the administration's treatment and portrayal of Xi, right? A very important issue here that I think that most people have put aside is they say that the Biden administration's response to Ukraine is likely to incentivize Xi and the Chinese to make a run at Taiwan. I think that has it the wrong way around. The reality is that because there has been no response for Wuhan, that has incentivized American adversaries, whether we're talking about Vladimir Putin, whether we're talking about the Chinese Communist Party. Remember what happened at Wuhan. This is the issue. The Chinese lied about where it started, how it started. They lied about the nature of transmission. At that point, it became an operation. And let's remember where this doctrine comes from. The idea of being able to deploy violence, hurt your adversary without them actually knowing what you're doing. This is a Soviet doctrine. So this reminds us how close at different points Moscow and Beijing have been in the past. But again, I think that's one of the things we need to start looking at. No one has held the Chinese Communist Party responsible for the millions of deaths around the world. Instead, what did they do?
Yeah, why?
Because the fundamental factor is, exactly. Our national security threat. It's not just China. It's our own elite. And that's what this series is about, by the way, with the Daily Wire. This is the problem, right? When we talk about the Democrats being a problem, it's not just Joe Biden. It's not the Biden family, and it's not the Biden administration. The Democrats, right, their campaign money comes from industries that are reliant on a cash flow from Beijing, Hollywood, big tech, and Wall Street. The Democrats are accordingly the pro-China faction, right?
There are a lot of Republicans are too. Lee, there are a lot of Republicans who are on the take as well, and I'm not letting them off the hook. The Democrats totally deserve blame, but so do Republicans. Lee, that was a big conversation. Thank you. It was great to have you on. Now we want to take you back to Ukraine tonight, where explosions